Hello, welcome to my mini cyber ethnography on Tâm Sự. Perform your confessions. But before anything, I need to tell you my confessions first. It is I am so lonely. Right now, I crave real stories from real people. I'm drowning in news deadline, but no one's sharing their life. Okay, it's 2025. I'm bored. My current need is to scream into the void or soak up someone else's messy stories. Boom! VN Express Music Forum. Top result. Wait, this feels familiar. My uncle used to print stories from this side and read them at home. Huh. Never thought I'd be lonely enough to follow in his footsteps, but here we are. So there's this interesting saying in Vietnam, family matters stay behind closed door. But on Tâm Sự, those doors swing wide open. Affair, divorce, abuse, all spilled out in a space that promises anonymity and, oddly, moral clarity. So I began to wonder, what is this space? So stay and I walk you through my explorations. What Bert might call a thick descriptions. Now, some context. Vn Express is Vietnam's most read online newspaper, owned by FPT, a state-affiliated tech corporation. It feels modern but operates within the bounds of Vietnam's state-controlled media systems. One section is Tâm Sự, or confessions, where people share personal stories about everything from divorce to infidelity. These aren't polished essays. They follow a confessional style with bold titles, drawing readers with a messy human quality. What makes Tâm Sự even more interesting is how it connects to hẹn hò or dating. The pain in Tâm Sự often transitions into healing and connections and even desire in hẹn hò, creating a narrative across the platform, from confessions to companionship. As I approach this side, a few key questions guided my analysis. How does Tâm Sự create the illusions of privacy while still performing a public role in shaping emotional and social behavior? In what way does the platform design and structure influence the way users perform the confessions? And how does the platform encourage or reinforce specific gendered, moral, or emotional narratives across its content? I argue that the Tâm Sự columns serve as a performative space where confessions are shaped by platform structured anonymity, editorial choices, and user interactions. These confessions are not just personal stories, but curated performances aligning with gendered, moral, and emotional scripts. The platform guides users toward specific narratives, turning personal vulnerability into publicly legible performances. To analyze them, I use three key theorists: Irving Goffman, Judith Butler, and Elena Gersand. Goffman asserted social life as performance. He distinguished frontstage and backstage as how we present ourselves to others versus how we act in private. On Tâm Sự, even though posters are anonymous, they still perform for an audience, the editors, the commenters. The structure of the stories, the moral tone, and the dramatic title suggest front-stage curations. I use Goffman to show how confessions aren't raw truth. They are performances shaped by the imagined gaze of readers. Butler gender performativity argues how gender roles are reproduced through repeated acts. On Tâm Sự, confessions often reproduce gender norms through gender scripts on post and sex story category in hẹn hò. These aren't individual. They're performances shaped by cultural expectations and reinforced through user comments and platform design. Person media ideology focus on how platforms shape what feels appropriate to share. I apply this to show how Tâm Sự structure intimacy, editorial filter, comment sections, and ties to the dating columns guide user towards specific emotional and moral narratives. For this project, I used three main methods. observations, thematic content analysis, and platform affordance analysis. First, observations. I observed the Msu sections for over a month, reading posts and tracking how users responded in the comments. I paid attention to patterns in tone, feedback, interactions. Next, I did a thematic content analysis. I identified recurring themes such as family conflict, gender expectations, and emotional labor to understand how these narratives reflect broader societal norms. Finally, I analyzed the platform affordances, what stories get featured, how anonymity is managed, and how the structures guides the user towards certain kind of sharing. Now, let's walk through them from a user journey's perspective. I'll guide you through my observations and analysis. First, stage authenticity. We will see how the site presents itself as an authentic confessional space, but in reality, it's carefully structured to shape the emotional narratives users share. Next, anonymity as a chosen horse. While the platform offers anonymity, it subtly pushes users toward self-disclosure and visibility, turning confessions into public performances. Then, from confessions to coupling, we'll look at how Tamsu reinforce traditional gender roles and nudge users toward heteronormative scripts. And finally, in the conclusion, we'll wrap things up and consider questions for future expansions. Let's begin. The title Tamsu. The title Tamsu meaning to confide or share one's heart immediately set the tone for the site. It promised intimacy, secrecy, and unfiltered emotions. A disclaimer just beneath the title reinforces tone by assuring user these are real story, submitted by reader, not copy content. Yet the same disclaimer reminds us that posts may be edited, and that contributors are legally accountable for the content. This simultaneous promises of realness and admissions of editorial control encapsulate the platform core logic. It performs authenticity. Government helps us make sense of this. He reminds us that even our most private moments can be carefully staged. Damsu looks like a backstage space where people take off the social mask, but it's still curated. Editors still hold power to shape submissions to match the platform emotional tone and moral value. Even before you click, the homepage set the scene. Titles are crafted for shock or suspense, paired with preview lines and visible reader comments. This interface primed the audience to expect not just a confessions, but a performance awaiting judgment. A story about wishing a paternalistic husband might be extended to judgment and urge to divorce. So, the meaning of a post isn't fixed, it's negotiated on a shared stage. Parts of Tam's appeal lies in its apparent anonymity. Writer use pseudonyms, and the confessional tone suggests a safe space for emotional release. It feels intimate, like a backstage moment where people can express themselves without being judged. But that privacy is mostly an illusion. Every post go through moderations. Some story get pushed to the highlight column or even turned into a podcast. So what feels like a private whisper is actually a public performance on a stage managed by editors and shaped by audience reactions. And nowhere is that clearer than in the comments. Anonymity doesn't shield writers from moral judgment. Commenters becomes a kind of community jury, saying things like, I think for your child, or listen to your mother-in-law. What may start as a raw outpouring of grief or anger quickly becomes a morality play, with pressure to find resolutions, to be better, to follow the scripts. What begins as a backstage emotions is pulled into a very public frontstage performance by the structure of the platform and the audience response. And then, just besides it, is Hẹn Hò, the dating sections. It's linked right at the top, like the punchline to the confessions, as if to say, now that you have shared your pain, maybe it's time to find love. When user moved from Tâm to Hẹn Hò, they step onto a new stage. If Tâm is about vulnerability and confessions, Hẹn Hò is about presentations. It's no longer about how you feel, but about who you appear to be. Goffman reminds that Hẹn Hò is a clear front stage. People put on curated version of themselves to attract a partner. But that's interesting because of how it is scripted, how scripted these roles already are. Men often describe themselves as hardworking, ready to provide. Women describe themselves as gentle, family oriented, and simple minded. These aren't personal. They're gender role being repeated, and they're not random. They're built into how the platform works. User must choose either male or female. They have to choose if they like female or male, or they are female or male. There's no space for non-binary or queer identities. The bios are short and formulaic. The goal is to be visible and desirable within narrow expectations. Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity helped explain what's happening. For Butler, gender isn't a stable identity. It's something users have to perform repeatedly to be legible. On Hẹn Hò, to be intelligible at all, users must cite the right norm. You become a good man or a modest woman through repetitions. These performances echo back into themselves many women's confessions, and not with rupture, but with endurance. You see it in many of the story women tell. A woman find out her husband cheated, but decided to stay for the kids. Another woman feel invisible, but decide to be more patient. These stories don't end with rupture. Again, they often end with endurance, something that follow the gender script, a number of repetitions of these gender script. That's not to say these stories are fake, but they do follow a familiar moral framework, one the platform seems to reward with visibility and validation from readers. From Tâm Sự to Hẹn Hò, we see a platform that reinforces social script through stories. First, users are invited to confess, often in moments of personal crisis. These confessions are then edited, framed, and subtly shaped to fit moral expectations. Next, users are nudged toward actions, toward reinventations through Hẹn Hò. But this reinventations is narrow. You have to become the right kind of man or woman following clear gender role. Finally, this journey is celebrated when it ends with in marriage or happy ending, looping back into Tâm Sự as a success story. Vulnerability becomes content, emotions become a tool, identity becomes performance. As Gerson reminds us, platforms don't just carry message, they teach us how to feel and act. And as Goffman and Butler show, identity isn't fixed, it's shaped by the role we are asked to play again and again. So we have to ask, when a state-linked platform scripts gender, morality, and intimacy so tightly, is it truly offering healing or is it reinforcing desire? Is Tâm a confessional space or is it a state-sponsored matchmaking service disguised as one? I leave you to answer those questions and extend my project on Tâm. Thank you for staying with me, and I wish you a good night. And also, I wish you to survive final.